Hello and welcome to our Distance Learning Instructional Technology webinar on Respondus Monitor. If you are out there and you want to say hi, you can unmute your audio, and if you feel really brave, you can unmute your video and say hi. No brave souls, huh? Hi, Kate. You might be muted right now.
Hello?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
I can hear you and see you.
All right.
So this is your office, huh?
Yes.
Wow. This is mine behind me. So
Wonderful. And Sam's right down the hall from me. So
yeah, she doesn't want to show herself.
right. I have to find a way to turn my volume up here because I can hardly hear you. Hold on.
That sounds louder. Oh, that's probably Sam.
I mean, so I can hear you guys better. What happens if I hit escape so I can go to my bottom part of my screen and move my volume up? Will I lose you?
You should be able to do that.
All right, let's see. Okay, now say something.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Hey, anyone else out there who's listening, if my volume is low, it might be on my end too. So if I'm curious, if you want to, if you can find the chat, if you can jump in there, throw in your name, your department, and what you hope to get out of today's session, and I will take a look at that. I've got some slides here, but I also want to make sure that we address everything that you want to talk about. And Kate is here as a special guest because she knows everything about Respondus Monitor. She's our expert.
Yeah, right.
And Megan is lurking and listening in the background. She looks awful stiff, like she's not really moving very much. But if you want to go to the slides for this presentation, which is Google Slides, the bit.ly link is up there. Can everybody see my screen? Kate, can you see the screen that I'm sharing right now?
Yep.
See any slides? Okay, good. So with each of these webinars, there's a bit.ly link to it if you wanted to go directly to it. It's DLIT webinars. But I'm going to go ahead and get started and talk about what is Respondus Monitor. And I know probably most of you on this webinar know, but I'm just going to throw out the description that was in the webinar and this also on the Respondus website. Respondus Monitor is a companion application for Lockdown Browser, and we've had Lockdown Browser for a number of years. Probably that might be a surprise to some people because you don't hear too much about it. But it uses webcam and video technology to prevent cheating during online exams. You know, when we know that there's no 100% guarantee that we can prevent students from cheating, and we can talk about how it does that. But it says Respondus Monitor integrates seamlessly. So we're going to find out from Kate if that's seamless is really the best word, and is ideal for non-proctored testing environments. So I put the link in the slides, and if you want to click on that link at some point, not right now, you'll crash everything. I'm just kidding. Then you can go to the Respondus site and get some more information. There is tons of resources there, from webinars to tip sheets to videos. There's tons of videos on it. Now, I'm going to play this video. We'll see if it works very well, because the question comes up. I'm sure that we all agree that cheating in any class, campus or online, is bad. And there does tend to be lots of focus on cheating in online classes. And it seems like one of the biggest reasons for that is faculty can't see their students while they're taking the assessment. And so they want ways to perhaps prevent that from happening. So I'm going to play this video and we'll see what happens.
Online exams offer a powerful way to assess students, but how How do you know the right person is taking the exam? How do you keep the students from printing or emailing the questions to classmates? How do you prevent access to books, phones, or other devices?
You might need to turn it up.
The integrity of online exams. The answer? Lockdown browser and Respondus monitor. With Lockdown browser, students are locked into the exam until they submit it for grading. They can't print, capture screen content, go to other web pages, or access other applications during the exam. Lockdown browser integrates seamlessly with your learning system, making it easy for both instructors and students. With structured environments, such as testing centers or classrooms, Lockdown browser provides all the security you need. But when students take exams from home or from the other side of the world, how do you ensure they're the right person and that they're not using inappropriate resources? That's where Respondus Monitor comes in. Respondus Monitor enhances Lockdown browser through the use of a webcam and video recording. For the exam, a startup team ensure the student's webcam and microphone are working properly. Then the student might be asked to show a presentation, video of their environment, or produce student is recorded during the exam, and afterwards an instructor can see detailed information such as the length of the exam and the student's grade. The instructor can also view updates taken in random intervals. There's no need to watch each video beginning to end. That's because Response Monitor is foremost in the current achievement. Students feel less pressure to achieve when there's a level playing field, and that's what Respondus Monitor provides. First, the instructors see something missed. Full video is always there for review. Instructors access Respondus Monitor from within their online course. There are no outside websites to log on to, no third-party systems or rosters to manage. Respondus Monitor provides incredible scalability, supporting thousands of test centers at any given time. This means instructors don't have to worry about busy testing centers or limiting the number of exams in course. Students, the only technical requirements for a computer, webcam, and a decent internet connection. And can be taken from anywhere in the world, any time of day or night. There's no need to schedule a proctor in advance. And students don't have to worry about strangers watching them while taking their exams. Over 700 universities and school districts use Lockdown browser or Respondus Monitor. These applications are designed exclusively for higher education and secondary schools. It doesn't matter if your institution has only a few blended learning courses or is entirely online. This allows you to get started with exams that take for you. But you'll never find us for exam or hourly fees. No way. It doesn't matter if it's 3 exams or 30. Always one low cost. Lockdown browser and Respondus Monitor offer cost-effective, scalable, and convenient solutions, protecting the integrity of online exams. To learn more, visit respondus.com.
All right. Did you hear any of that?
Nope.
Nope, nothing? Not even, no audio at all, or just?
Teeny bit, but I was reading it was closed caption, so I read it.
Yes, so that's why we closed
I had watched
captioned
it already before. So
yeah, I figured you probably had. So if you couldn't hear it, some of the things that they talked about in the video were preventing students from printing or printing the exam or using outside resources, trying to help students feel more comfortable by not having a stranger proctor their exam looking over them while they take their test, not having to travel to a remote proctoring location for their online class, et cetera, et cetera. So I have a slide in here where I wanted to talk just real quickly about that whole proctoring and exam thing. So Lockdown browser is primarily it's a self-contained browser that basically locks the learning management system down and not access anything else while students taking the exam. And it's primarily for in-person proctoring. So while you use it in combination with Monitor for online testing, if you're going to have a student go to an assessment center or you're going to proctor their test in a lab or something, then really all you need is the Lockdown browser. And there is a iOS app, sorry, no Android as of yet, but there is an iOS Android app or iOS app that goes with it if students want to take your assessment on iOS, and there's a setting in the assessment that you have to set in order for them to be able to do that. Monitor is really an additional function that is integrated with Blackboard and uses the student's webcam, and it monitors basically their environment, and you can get a picture of their ID and etc. And also video the whole thing and flag if there's anything unusual in the video. So those are the distinctions between the two, and you want to use monitor when you're talking about proctoring at a distance. And just before we talk to Kate about her experience with all of that, I just want to kind of dispel a myth that this is like some kind of live proctoring that you do as an online faculty member, and you're watching the student as they take the assessment, or that you have to review all the video that it captures. So with that, we want to introduce Kate, teaches in the psychology department. And Kate, I have some questions here, but I bet you're just busting to talk about Respondus Monitor. So.
Well, I would be happy to. I'll just kind of give you how I came to use it, and then maybe later I have some questions as well, just some things
Awesome.
I've run into as I've tried it this semester.
Mm-hmm.
But I began it this past summer, tried it with one online class, I think, just to see how it went. And I was so pleasantly surprised that it was so easy to do. It really was very user-friendly. I met with Megan and Raphael, and they kind of walked me through how to set up the assessment. And really, it was just so simple. I just created the test like I usually would. And then I implemented it through Respondus, where I could select things like whether a student could use an iPad, which was one issue because I was told that they couldn't, but I had accidentally set it up to say they could. And in my practice exam, a student did use her iPad. So that's one thing I'm not sure of whether it's available or not. Do you know, Gary?
If the iOS app is available, or the...
No, well, yeah, to let students complete the exam using an iPad.
Yeah, so the way it's supposed to work is that in the settings in Blackboard, which I can show you, there's supposed to be a box that you check for being able to use iOS app, and then the student would need the app on their iPad. So rather than trying to take it through Safari or taking it through a secure lockdown browser, it's kind of lockdown browser app for the iOS. So if they have that and you have it set properly, they can. They're not supposed to be able to do that if you don't have it set up.
Okay, that makes sense. So I decided to use it really because of that whole concerns you said already. And I put right in my syllabus, I said I realize it's inconvenience, that slight inconvenience, but that I thought it was fair to students in my lecture classes who had me right there watching them taking the test, so that it would be a similar experience. And also just for accountability, that I could make sure that it was actually them taking the test. And I haven't had any negative feedback from students about that. They all really seem to get it.
Great.
I was happy about that, yeah. I just used what Megan and Raphael gave me in terms of what to put in my syllabus, in terms of how students can go about downloading Lockdown Browser and Monitor. And then I also told them that if they didn't have an internal webcam, that they're pretty inexpensive if you needed to purchase an external one. And I also let them know that if they really didn't want to be recorded, then they could go to the GRCC testing center or a testing center near them, but they needed to let me know that within the first week of the class.
Okay.
So I set up that practice exam because I just wanted to make sure that everybody was set to go and they really knew how to do this before the actual first exam.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them that if they didn't do the practice exam, then if they had troubles on their first exam, I was going to be pretty unlikely to reset it for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I really didn't have a problem with people. The practice exam, I put like 2 questions, like what's the name of the course, what's my name, just to make sure that they were able to access it.
Great. So you've taken half of my best practices slides coming up here.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's great. So I'm imagining that Megan shared the language from Respondus that suggests what you should put in your syllabus and contains a link to the download for students for the lockdown browser in it. So that's a best practice. And also they suggest having some kind of small assessment that students can use for practice. I do have a couple questions for you. The first one is, did you have any students complain that they didn't know of this requirement before they signed up for the class?
Nope.
No, that's great.
And that was, so now I've done this in like maybe 5 online classes now. So nope.
Yep. So I know that in some online classes, students are being required to come to campus to take the assessment. So I imagine if they hear, I don't have to and I can get it proctored online, that they might enjoy that.
Yeah.
The other question is, did you have any students that actually went to the assessment center to take it? And
yes,
I know once you set the assessment up to use with Lockdown Browser and Monitor, did that create any issues with the assessment center proctoring the assessment?
No, there was one person this summer that didn't wasn't quite sure, so they just called me on my cell and I told them the password and it was fine. But
Okay.
other than that, nothing. I just let them know at the beginning of the semester what my password was. And then when they're sitting there with the student, I said, just please make sure the student doesn't see the password, because it's the
Right.
same for every single exam. And then students were able to take it that way. So I have had a handful of students decide they wanted to do that instead.
Okay. And do you know why, just offhand? Do they lack a webcam or just were on campus already, or?
One did not want to be filmed. That kind of
Okay.
didn't like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I don't really remember the other reasons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned an interesting point that when you set up an assessment to use either Monitor or Lockdown, so proctored or online, then you have to have a password. And it's really kind of just like the other assessments you might give in the assessment center, where if a student needs to log in, you have to give instructions to the assessment center with a password so that they take it at the right time. So it really probably wasn't much more in terms of requirements for you.
No, it was so easy. It was a simple email to Gloria Thomas saying, this is the password for the semester. And she said, thanks. I remember what the one they had to call me on the cell phone was, one of the workers didn't realize that the students have to enter the test through Lockdown Browser. And they were trying to use the password just through going straight to Blackboard.
Right.
So that was the issue. But now they know over there in the testing center. I haven't had any other issues with it.
Great. So that's probably a best practice. I know that they're probably much more used to just getting a password to log into Blackboard and take an assessment. So letting them know that it's got to be taken through the Lockdown Browser is probably a good thing to do.
Right. And that's
not that you didn't do that, but
yes.
yeah, they may have missed that.
Right. And then just reminding them and the students that it just means you click on that icon on your desktop first, and then it just pulls it up as if it looks the same. And so then you enter into Blackboard.
So how did it go? Other than the setting it up and offering it online or through the assessment center, did you catch any cheaters?
Oh, so
No.
I'll get to that. I have one more issue.
Okay, go ahead.
I did find through a student that it doesn't work with Chromebook.
Yep.
Yeah, So that was just one. I'm just trying to share all the, things that I ran across.
Yeah, that's a good point, because more and more students are using Chromebooks.
Yeah. So I just know as a faculty, it's always good to know those little things, before you start it. Let's see. I think that's it. So the whole cheating thing, so it's hard to tell. Uh-oh, my light just turned off. Hold on. Sitting in the dark.
There you go.
A couple things happened. So one student, a couple times the student has like moved their laptop, and so then they're suddenly not in the screen. It's like this the whole rest of the video. So one student on the first exam, I did send an email and I said, please just be sure to make sure that you put your laptop on a desk so it's flat and it won't move. And she called me and she was a little upset and said, you accused me of cheating. And so I, of course, just calmed her down and said I wasn't doing that. I just wanted to make sure that for the future exams, I would be able to, see her clearly. There's an issue just on this last exam where one student had 4 attempts. So I set my online exams where if they were to lose internet connection, they could get right back in during the allotted time.
Yeah.
But I'm a little confused whether Respondus keeps recording during that, or if that means they could have gotten out of the exam and looked at something and then gotten back in.
That's a good question. I haven't had that come up. Megan, are you available for a consult here?
I am, but I haven't even thought of that.
Yeah.
And haven't had that question either, so I'm not sure. My gut would say that, like, if they lost their connection, or if as soon as the browser's closed, it won't, or maybe even I would think the test. As soon as the test is closed, whether it be intentionally or not, I would think that the recording stops.
Well, I tried to decipher if that was true though when I was watching the video, and it didn't seem to me like, so like it was a total of 46 minutes, I think. And I didn't notice it like stopping, and it seems like if they had come back, wouldn't it have started over? I don't know. So that's just one question I'm working with to figure that one out.
Maybe we should look at that one. I would be curious what does it do with the previous attempts? So
yeah, we can do a couple things. We can test that out. I mean, you can set it up for a test student. You can try that. And the other thing is that they have webinars on how to do this from Respondus, and we can ask their expert what's going to happen. I think it's probably been asked, like in the context of, has anybody ever tried cheating by getting out of the assessment and then, looking up things and then coming back on and saying that their internet was interrupted or something like that? I would think they would plan for that, but yeah, I don't know the answer right now either.
Yeah, I would say overall, I feel like it's been, I feel a lot better about things, because I know at least from that when students get on, they have to hold up their ID to the camera, and then it takes a picture of them as well. So I can look and see if those things match. I like that. And then in terms of reviewing, I mean, I teach several online courses, and what I like is I can go on there and it prioritizes for me, like which video should I be sure to review more carefully. It'll say high priority. And then I'm still struggling a little bit with like, what does it mean? So like if somebody is out of the screen for a minute, like how to follow up with that student.
Right.
Yeah, and find out what happened.
Right, especially when the student you approach very nicely, and even then we're sensitive to, oh, you're accusing me of cheating. So
Right, right,
starting out with, I'm not accusing you of cheating, but
right, exactly, right.
so it sounds like you have you've used it since they updated the monitor kind of dashboard to show like which ones you should really take a look at first, like an index of potential problems in it. So
Yeah, I like
that's a
that.
nice new feature.
Yeah, and they let you, like, so they have, when you look at it, there's those picture frames at like the 1 minute mark or the 4 minute mark. So you can kind of jump to those places so you don't have to watch the whole video.
Right. In your experience, what kind of flags did you see?
Well, the biggest one has been a couple of them where all of a sudden they were in view and then they're not in view.
Okay.
And then one student, he set up the camera kind of like to the side. And so I just had to email him after the first test and say, next time, can you please have it facing your face? So
right.
maybe I hadn't made that clear. And then I had one girl, I just, I keep this all to myself, but as they're, she's taking the test and she's yelling, don't come in, I'm taking my test.
That sounds like me trying to keep my kids out.
Yes, exactly, right.
Yeah. All right. So it sounds like you had a pretty good experience.
I did have one student that got through my test really quickly, like 11 minutes for a 50-item test. And
wow.
This was a course where students from the same program often take the course. And it just kind of gave me the clue, like maybe my test was out there. So I changed, that kind of motivated me to get in there and rewrite the test for the next ones.
Good. I think that's a good point, that Blackboard has the capacity to tell us how long students spend on content, but we don't really pay a whole lot of attention to that sometimes. But if we have a video of it, it kind of stands out.
Yeah.
Great. So I do have another question for you real quick. Do you have any issues with anybody else? Of course, Sam's on the webinar too, but with anybody else in your department who feels like, a student might take one course over another, you guys offer multiple sections of the course in the online format. Why, or from students complaining, why do I have to do that in this class, but I don't have to do it in another section?
Yeah, well, I don't know, Sam, if you're listening or not, but I did want to bring this to our next department meeting and just kind of talk that over, because I do feel like it would be better if we all had the same standard. Yeah, it just makes more sense.
Yeah, great. All right, so if you were to give a tip or advice, because we're recording this and we're hoping lots more folks are going to watch it down the road, any benefits or challenges along the way that you want to share, or best practices you came across?
Let me look at my notes.
I want to note in the recording that Kate looked down at her notes during.
Right, I was not cheating.
Okay.
No, I think I've mentioned them all. I mean, I had looked into this like a couple years ago. You said it's been around a while.
Yep.
And I couldn't figure it out. I don't know, it wasn't user friendly or something, and so I just forgot, just said forget it. And then I'm really glad that I came back to it, because it's really easy, I think, to use.
Great. That's great to hear. We didn't pay you to say any of this, right?
No, of course not.
Well, and I'm glad that Megan and Raphael were able to help you, with anything that comes up.
They were very helpful.
Cool. Well, thank you. I know that you need to get running.
Yes.
And you're welcome to stay around, but I really appreciate hearing from somebody who's currently using it. I know that the institution would like to see more people using it, based on not having online students have to come to campus to have their assessment proctored, and also just not making sure the student who's in the class is actually the student who's taking the assessment. So
Right.
really appreciate you doing that.
I agree.
All righty.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
All right. Okay, I'm going to just jump into some other stuff that you may not have seen before. This was shared with us from our IT department, and a special thanks to Nate Hamilton for pulling this together very quickly. But in terms of usage, the smaller, lighter blue is the number of courses that Respondus Monitor is being used in, and the other number, the darker blue, is the number of seats used. And you can kind of see over a period of time that we've got quite a bit of increase in the number of seats that are being used. And as was reflected on that special guest slide, there is some increased usage in the nursing department as well as psychology, and some other areas of the campus are picking up. Megan, do you have an idea? I know I can go in and look at the data, but of other areas of the campus that are using it?
Oh gosh.
I
No.
should have snuck these questions to you ahead of time.
Yeah, I'm like, oh man, you had to
I
hit
got you
me
again.
with a zinger there.
Sorry.
I know someone in medical terminology
Okay.
using it, and I think someone in occupational therapy was also using it. I'm not sure if they're still using it, you know, how recently.
Okay.
And in the past, we've had expressed interest from people in like history and even political science, different disciplines.
Okay.
So, you
Great.
know, it's one thing you can use, you know, if you're still, you know, kind of on the fence and you know you're not sure, you can always do a combination. You could always have students come to the testing center for a final or a midterm and final, and you could have other things done in Respondus Monitor. It is very nice for just, you know, the ability to be able to verify that indeed the person taking the assessment is your student who signed up for the class. So
Yep.
I'm really happy to hear though that she's had such good experiences with it.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. I do see from the data that we're getting that the number of courses is increasing and the number of seats is increasing. And you reminded me of another point, and that is that it's not just confined to online or hybrid courses, that you actually could use it in your campus class. And I know that some people might say, well, why would I need a proctoring tool especially the monitor component, if I'm dealing with a campus class? I know one thing I'm looking at doing is I have a final exam in a lab where they take the assessment on a computer through Blackboard. And right now my campus students are required to come to that room on that date and time to take it. And I know I occasionally get students who say, I can take it then, but I can't be there. And I just think it would be a great idea to allow that student to take that assessment online at a distance and use the webcam proctoring part to it. So I think you can use this in all kinds of courses. So this is some more information that we got from our IT department in terms of the total number of courses. Active courses who've deployed monitors 58. Total sessions 2108. Seats activated by students 298, and purchased by students 0, because we have a license. They don't purchase it individually. So I did want to try to do a quick demo of what Kate was talking about in terms of setting up an assessment, and I want to pull out of the slides for a second here. And Just want to make sure that can you see that? Megan, can you see the Blackboard website?
Yes, I can.
All right, so an easy question there. All right, so I am going to go down and go into my test course here. And in my test course, I have a final exam. And the way you set up to use Respondus Monitor and Lockdown Browser is under Course Tools. So if you go under Course Tools, you'll see a link that says Respondus Lockdown Browser. And you'll see that if your institution has set up Respondus Monitor and Lockdown Browser to work with Blackboard. And if for some reason you didn't see that, there's also down here under Customization Tool Availability, you can set it so that you'll be able to use it in the course. But by default, you should see this link. And if you click on this link, you get a little bit of an infomercial here on what's new in Respondus Monitor. But if you continue to the Lockdown Browser Monitor screen, you can see that currently I have, I'm going to move that, have my final exam set up to require a webcam and a lockdown browser. But you know, for these other assessments, as well as I can go in and look at this assessment, you would go into settings, and then I'll just walk you through quickly some of the settings. So the first one is require Respondus lockdown browser for this exam, and I have that checked. I don't have any additional password set for that. Right now, students would get information about how to log in, how to get lockdown browser, and would go into that assessment either at a distance or in the proctoring center. The next one is monitor webcam settings, and I have it checked to require Respondus Monitor for the exam, which is what I would use if I were proctoring this at a distance. And earlier, this is the box I was talking about, either Respondus Monitor or a proctored lab. So this is what Kate uses in order to allow them to do it online in their home or wherever, or to come to the assessment center. And if you check that box, it says, note, students taking the exam in a proctored lab will still need to use Lockdown Browser. So we were talking about how the assessment center staff needs to know about that, and they will get a password. So I don't use that setting. I'm going to just check require Respondus Monitor for this exam. And then this is the part that's kind of nice to go through. If you want a webcam check, what you're going to get, you can actually preview that, and that's one thing that does come up is if a student has certain security set on their computer, it might block flash or whatever, but you can see that it does a webcam check, and you say, do you see this image? Yes, I see it. Then I'll close that down. The next one is student photo. So you click that preview, and then it'll pull up and allow the student to take a picture, and just to make sure that they can capture images, because the next one is show ID. So to preview that, I'll just pull it up, and it prompts the students to hold their identification up to the camera, and I just happen to have my ID handy right here. This is when I had hair, so I'll hold it over here up, and then this is what Kate's using to compare the person in the picture to their ID, and then they would take a picture of that. Then the next one down is an environment check, and this one really is prompts the student to start a recording and then move the webcam around to show what else is in the room. And this would be part of the recording. With a laptop, you know, a student may pick up that laptop and move it around. And I don't know, maybe that's part of the issue Kate was having with the student whose webcam was not in place. sometimes when they move those webcams around and to set it back down, they don't necessarily get themselves back in the full frame. And then this last one, you can customize instructions. So here's the preview. During this exam, you shouldn't access other materials, phone, tablet, etc., or communicate with other people. Stay in your seat, focus on the computer screen. So this is the default language that they get, but you can also edit the text and then add whatever you want to. Maybe it's okay if they use some other resource and that's in the video. And then down here, there's some advanced settings, and it says allow another application to use a microphone. And if you click on explain, it talks about how in some cases an assessment might involve some kind of oral assessment, so you want other programs to be able to access the microphone. Make webcam videos additionally available for viewing on mobile devices. And this one, which I use, is a demo student account, and you put the username in there because faculty did say they'd like a way to try this out. While we're talking about that, you don't need Respondus Lockdown Browser in order to do all this. Really, this is, like I showed you, this is all settings within Blackboard that you set up. However, you can get Respondus Lockdown Browser set up on your GRCC computer. Last check it is in the Software Center if you want to install it, or if you have a Mac, contact IT. And if you haven't had it updated in a while, make sure that you check the Lockdown Browser and get it updated by IT on the Mac. But then you can actually walk through the steps of taking that assessment through a Lockdown Browser. And as Kate mentioned, it's really important for students and the Assessment Center to know that they cannot take this assessment now unless they have the Lockdown Browser downloaded and installed. So it is a really good practice to have students see that in the syllabus and walk through an activity where they have to download, install, and use the Lockdown Browser. So when it becomes time for them to take that assessment, they're not scrambling, where is the download? How do I get it? How do I get it installed? I'm having problems with it. So, and if they do have problems with it, they can contact the help desk. So that's really all there is to setting this up. And I'm going to jump back into my slides here because I did want to talk a little bit about best practices here. So as I mentioned, using the test user so you can actually walk through and try out the assessment. If it's a high stakes final exam, you're going to want to make sure that you walk through it first. Do not change the test name. So this has come up quite a bit. Once that you can change that assessment all you want, but once you set it up for Lockdown Browser or Monitor, you don't want to go in and change the test name because that will cause problems and it won't work. Ask me how I know. Don't modify the test password if you have one. You don't have to have a password set on it in addition to the password that's kind of going on behind the scenes. And without getting too technical, when you set up an assessment to work with Lockdown Browser and Monitor, it generates this unique password that links it to the assessment. And students don't have to know that. You don't have to know that. And you don't want to change passwords after you have everything all set up. Add a statement to the syllabus, and I'll show you a link where you can go to the website and they have suggested language that you can put in and tweak in your syllabus. And as Kate mentioned, holding some kind of practice test. Maybe it's a short syllabus quiz or something at the beginning of the semester where you walk them through the steps. Maybe it's part of your orientation, and then they use it to take an assessment. I know at one time I had a student in the Philippines who had to take the assessment, and we used Monitor to do that. And we actually worked together beforehand to walk through all the steps and make sure that she was able to use her webcam and take it through there. So sometimes if it's not your entire class, you can work with students one-on-one to make sure they're ready to do this, because it does come up in some situations where this isn't a class-wide assessment, but a makeup of some kind. You have one student that you're administering this to. So instructor training. On the last slide, I'll show you how you can sign up for future webinars that really go into the detail about how to set up Lockdown Browser and Monitor. But those trainings cover the things that's mentioned here, talking about how to use Lockdown Browser and Monitor, and some things that we didn't talk about in terms of the actual video, what to look for, the assessment data that's collected, and some more best practices and tips. But if you go to the Respondus site in the products area and look at their webinar series, you'll see that there's an instructor training, and they do a really good job. So this is another one that we got from our IT department, and Megan, you can jump in here if there's anything else that I should know about. But there is lockdown, in addition to the assessment center that Kate mentioned, there are some labs on campus that do have the Lockdown Browser. So in the ATC, the Calkins Science Center, and Cook Academic Hall, in these rooms that are listed here, there are computers that do have the Lockdown Browser. Now, having said that, I would not just depend upon, oh, students can go there. I wouldn't throw this in your syllabus or your course without coordinating with those areas. I have seen situations where somebody in that area didn't realize that it was even installed on the computer, or how it's used, or even the big one usually is that the person is not available to proctor an assessment for you. So I suggest this is if you want a location where you might be able to proctor an assessment, or maybe you can coordinate with those areas to do the assessment for you. So as we wrap up, I just want to mention the website that we have for support of Respondus. So if you go to our Distance Learning Instructional Technology website, DLIT/Respondus, we've got some information there about for students and for faculty. And I'll just pull it up here real quick. The first part is from a student perspective and talks about how your teacher might require the use of Lockdown Browser and how to get that, and how to get the iOS app or Monitor, and the fact that the big thing is it's proctored at a distance, and you're going to need a webcam to be able to use Monitor. And then the faculty perspective, how to get a Lockdown Browser installed if you want to test things out, how Monitor works, and also, since this is a Respondus page, there is another product that allows you to upload test questions into Blackboard. So sometimes people get confused about Respondus, that particular assessment software, and this proctoring software. And there's a little introduction video for students. So that is kind of an overview of our website. There's a link there for the webinars, and you can sign up for those. You sign up for those, I believe they'll send you a link afterwards if you're not able to attend. Anytime that you have questions about any instructional technology issues or online learning type issues, you can email us at dlit@grcc.edu. If you're having a technical issue with the Lockdown Browser, we might be able to help you, but in some cases the best thing to do is contact IT support directly. If you would rather call us or stop in, our phone number is there. Our location is on the main campus in 316 Main. That's it in terms of resources and questions. I wanted to make sure that I allowed about 10 minutes at the end of the webinar